What I'm about to expose will make your blood boil and your jaw hit the floor. While Anthony Albanese was busy playing diplomatic footsie with international partners and posing for photo ops, James Patterson was frantically waving red flags about a security threat so serious it could fundamentally change how safe you feel in your own neighborhood. This isn't just another political squabble between Liberal and Labour. This is about your safety, your family's protection, and a government that apparently ignored screaming warning sirens until it was almost too late. Right now, as you're watching this video, there are people walking Australian streets who shouldn't be here, planning activities that would make your worst nightmares seem like bedtime stories. James Patterson, the shadow finance minister who's built a reputation as one of the sharpest security minds in Parliament, just delivered the most devastating political beatdown in recent Australian history, and Albanese's response was so pathetically weak it would make a wet tissue paper seem strong by comparison. The mainstream media is trying to downplay this story because it exposes just how dangerously incompetent our current government has been on national security, but I'm going to give you the unfiltered truth that'll have you questioning everything you thought you knew about Australia's safety under Labour leadership. Here's what actually happened behind those closed Parliament House doors while you were distracted by reality TV and social media drama. For months, not days, not weeks, but months, James Patterson and the coalition have been desperately trying to get Labour to wake up to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard threat operating on Australian soil. We're talking about Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, an organization so dangerous that countries around the world have classified them as a terrorist entity, but apparently Albanese thought he knew better. Picture this scenario and tell me if it doesn't make your stomach turn while you're dropping your kids off at school, going to work, visiting shopping centers, and living your normal Australian life. Members of a foreign military organization with documented links to terrorism, assassination plots, and international destabilization have been potentially operating freely in our communities because our government was too politically correct, too diplomatically cautious, or too plain incompetent to take decisive action. Patterson didn't just criticize the government, he absolutely destroyed them with facts so damning that Albanese's office probably needed a team of spin doctors working overtime just to figure out how to respond without looking completely negligent. The shadow finance minister pointed to specific incidents, real attacks, actual threats against Australian citizens that could have been prevented if Labour had listened to repeated coalition warnings about listing the IRGC as a terrorist organisation. But here's where this story gets absolutely explosive, and this is the part that has security experts privately expressing serious concerns about government competence. Patterson specifically mentioned attacks on Jewish community leaders, including targeting of Alex Rifkin's former residence. Rifkin isn't just any random citizen, he's a prominent figure in Australia's Jewish community, and attacks against him represent exactly the kind of international terrorism spillover that intelligence agencies have been warning about for years. Let me break down exactly why this matters to every single Australian watching this video. The IRGC isn't some ragtag group of extremists operating from caves. They are a sophisticated, well-funded, internationally connected military organization with resources that rival many national armies. They have demonstrated capabilities in cyber warfare, assassination plots, international intimidation campaigns, and destabilization operations across multiple continents. These aren't theoretical threats, they are documented realities happening in countries around the world. While Albanese was busy attending international climate summits and making speeches about Australia's place in the global community, Patterson was trying to get the government to focus on immediate, tangible security threats that could directly impact Australian families. The coalition wasn't asking for some massive military intervention or controversial diplomatic upheaval. They were asking for a simple administrative decision to classify a known terrorist organization as what it actually is, a terrorist organization. The timing of Patterson's explosive parliamentary performance couldn't have been more strategically devastating for Labour. Just as the government was trying to project strength on national security issues, the shadow finance minister revealed months of ignored warnings, dismissed intelligence assessments, and bureaucratic foot-dragging that left Australia vulnerable to international threats that other allied nations had already addressed decisively. What makes Patterson's criticism so politically lethal is that he's not some backbench troublemaker looking for headlines, he's a serious policy wonk with deep expertise in security and intelligence matters. When he speaks about threats to Australian national security, even Labour MPs privately acknowledge that he knows what he's talking about. His warnings weren't partisan political stunts, they were legitimate security assessments based on international intelligence and documented IRGC activities in allied countries. The government's delayed response to these security concerns reveals something much more troubling than simple political disagreement. It suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of how international terrorism operates in the modern world. Terror organizations don't respect diplomatic niceties or bureaucratic timelines. They exploit exactly the kind of administrative delays and political hesitation that Patterson was desperately trying to overcome with his repeated warnings about IRGC activities. Here's what should terrify every Australian: the attacks and intimidation campaigns that Patterson highlighted weren't random criminal activities or isolated incidents. They represent a pattern of international terrorism that's been documented across multiple allied nations. When similar organizations target prominent community figures in countries like the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada, intelligence services immediately recognize these as coordinated international operations rather than domestic criminal matters. The political implications of Patterson's security revelations extend far beyond typical opposition criticism of government policy. He's essentially arguing that Labour's bureaucratic caution and diplomatic sensitivity have created security vulnerabilities that put ordinary Australians at risk. This isn't about partisan politics, it's about whether our government can effectively protect citizens from international threats that operate according to their own timeline, not our political calendar. What makes this story even more infuriating is how predictable the government's eventual response became. After months of ignoring coalition warnings, dismissing security concerns, and apparently prioritizing diplomatic considerations over citizen safety, Labour finally took action, but only after the threats materialized into actual incidents that couldn't be ignored or downplayed. Patterson's parliamentary performance was masterful political theatre, but more importantly, it was devastating policy criticism backed by documented evidence of government negligence. He didn't just attack Labour's security record, he systematically dismantled their credibility on the most fundamental responsibility of any government: protecting its citizens from foreign threats. The international context makes Labour's delayed response even more inexcusable. Allied nations have been dealing with IRGC operations for years, sharing intelligence, coordinating responses, and implementing protective measures that Australia apparently wasn't prioritizing. While our international partners were taking decisive action against documented terrorist threats, our government was apparently stuck in bureaucratic review processes that prioritized diplomatic sensitivity over citizen safety. Behind the political rhetoric and parliamentary theatrics, Patterson's criticism reveals something genuinely concerning about how Australia's national security apparatus responds to emerging international threats. The gap between intelligence assessment and administrative action suggests systemic problems that could leave the country vulnerable to other international threats that don't fit neatly into existing bureaucratic categories. The broader implications of this security debate extend beyond any single terrorist organization or specific threat assessment. Patterson's criticism highlights fundamental questions about government priorities, bureaucratic responsiveness, and political leadership when faced with evolving international security challenges that require decisive action rather than diplomatic consultation. What should anger every Australian taxpayer is that we fund sophisticated intelligence agencies, comprehensive security assessments, and professional diplomatic services specifically to identify and respond to these kinds of international threats before they impact Australian communities. When government delays compromise citizen safety despite clear intelligence warnings, it represents a failure of the most basic governmental responsibility. The political fallout from Patterson's security revelations will likely continue for months, but the immediate impact is clear. He's exposed serious gaps in government responsiveness to international terrorism threats that put ordinary Australians at unnecessary risk. While Labour scrambles to defend their delayed response, the shadow finance minister has already moved on to identifying other security vulnerabilities that require immediate government attention. This story isn't just about one opposition politician criticizing government policy, it's about whether Australia can effectively protect its citizens from international threats in an increasingly dangerous world where terrorist organizations operate across borders without regard for diplomatic protocols or bureaucratic timelines that apparently constrain government responses to evolving security challenges. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Australian News CC family where the real stories come to life. See you in the next one.